Hi, all. Welcome. We are so glad that you're here. We're slowly letting folks in from the waiting room. I'm going to give it a few seconds and then begin my introduction. Great. As more and more of you enter, I'd like to say thanks for being here. Welcome to our fourth webinar in the 2025 to 2026 Farm to Institution webinar series titled Voices of the Network. Today's webinar is called Sowing Success at Bon Appétit, Local Sourcing and Lessons Learned. We have the skills and experience from 6 individuals who are going to be sharing and talking about their own lessons learned and challenges with local sourcing, from a panel presentation to a Q&A. So with that, my name is Britt Florio. I am the program manager at Fine and one of the organizers of this series. Helping out on today's webinar is Fine's Director of Communications, Sarah Lyman, who is here for tech support. If you have any tech issues at any point with Zoom, feel free to message Sarah Lyman directly in the chat, and she can help answer any questions or challenges that you've had. Now that we've introduced ourselves, please introduce yourself in the chat. Your name, your role in the food system, or anything you want to share about why you're here today. Next slide, please, Elise. I'd like to tell you a little bit more about Farm to Institution New England, or FINE for short. FINE is a dynamic network of communities, organizations, and institutions working together to create a just, equitable, and regenerative food system in New England and beyond. FINE believes institutions hold substantial power and wield significant influence in our food system through their food service, education, investment, employment, and land use. We know that developing institutional food value chains that are responsive to community needs and rooted in racial justice, food sovereignty, and climate resilience is a critical way to leverage the power of institutions to change the food system. The changes we seek can only be achieved when led by a collaborative, adaptive network. In the chat, Sarah Lyman is going to be sharing our impact report. So if you want to learn more about the impact that FINE is having and striving to have, and also our recent summit report for our biennial event, the last one taking place in 2025, and the next one will be 2027. We hope to see you there. Next slide, Elise. FINE has been hosting a monthly webinar series throughout the fall of 25 and into the winter of 26 as a way to keep the energy going from last spring's Northeast Farm to Institution Summit. So this is the fourth webinar in our series, and we only have one more left, which will take place March 11th at noon. So if you're looking for more information about the series, if you want to check out our previous webinar recordings or register for the March 11th webinar, we're also going to put a link into the chat for more information. Next slide. If you're here today, it's because our marketing worked and you're passionate about today's topic and our speakers. So we have 1 hour together and it's an action-packed agenda. We're going to make sure to leave time at the end for your questions. If you have questions for speakers throughout, please put those questions in the chat. I'm going to aggregate them all and we'll save them for the Q&A. And with that, I would love to turn it over to Elise Dudley, who will be moderating the panel of speakers who helped organize this. So Elise, please welcome and introduce yourself to our audience.
Thank you so much, Britt, and thank you, Fine, for the invitation to participate in the winter webinar series. My name is Elise, and I am the Regional Sustainability Coordinator for Bon Appetit Management Company in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, and I'm based in Philly. So first, to introduce you to Bon Appetit, we are an on-site restaurant management and food service company. We serve universities, corporations, and specialty venues, and we have over 1,000 cafes in 34 states. We serve food that is prepared from scratch, alive with flavor and nutrition, and sourced in a socially responsible manner. And we do this for the well-being of our guests and the environment. I'm really excited for you all to hear today from our wonderful panel of chefs and managers from across the region about their experiences working with our local vendors and the lessons they've learned along the way. You'll hear introductions from them later on, but before we jump into the panel discussion, I would love to pass it over to Shira Kaufman, who is our local sourcing specialist. She's going to share a bit more about our Farm to Fork program.
Thanks, Elise. I'm really happy to be here. As Elise said, my name is Shira Kaufman. I oversee our Farm to Fork program amongst all of our accounts, but we'll be talking more specifically about New England today. I'm based in California, but I'm from New England, so this conference is near and dear to my heart. And talking about New England and food systems in New England is near and dear to my heart. So Farm to Fork is Bon Appetit's groundbreaking local sourcing program. It's been around since 1999, so it's one of the pillars of what we do at Bon Appetit. And I only have 5 minutes today, so I could talk about Farm to Fork for hours, but I'm going to very briefly go over what it looks like kind of on a granular level. So over the past 25 years, our Farm to Fork initiative has grown into several different umbrella subsystems. So we've got Farm to Fork as the larger system, but we also have smaller categories within Farm to Fork, how we determine what types of products we're kind of putting into the different programs. So Farm to Fork is the larger umbrella, but then underneath that umbrella, we've got our Fish to Fork program, which supports local seafood and aquaculture. We've got Ag of the Middle, which is supporting mid-sized producers, and Locally Crafted, which supports artisans and value-add products. So our chefs strive to purchase 20% of their annual food budget from Farm to Fork vendors. And those Farm to Fork vendors fall into some of these different categories. So Farm to Fork is a really important program, and we'll talk a little bit more about how that looks in New England moving forward. Next slide. Okay, so these are this is a little bit more of a granular look at each of these categories. As I said, Farm to Fork is our kind of larger umbrella. And this slide kind of goes over some of the actual parameters that these categories fall under. So on a larger level, Farm to Fork, our main parameters are that our vendors have to be small, local, and owner operated. So what that looks like is small means under 5 million in annual revenue. Local means within 150 miles, and owner run and operated. It's pretty, it makes sense. And then locally crafted, we kind of went over that. Ag of the Middle, Fish to Fork. I don't think I have time to go over each of these things, but this is kind of a little snapshot into what these categories look like.
Sweet. Thank you so much, Shira. And we'll learn a little bit more about what this looks like in action during our panel discussion. So before we move into the panel, I also want to share a brief overview of our white paper, Sowing Success. So this report was published in September 2024, just about a year and a half ago, and it distills research from two major study phases conducted in 2017 and then in 2023 to understand what really drives successful local purchasing at our accounts. So fellows on our national food education team interviewed and surveyed executive chefs and managers across the country. After the interviews, we acquired Farm to Fork purchasing data and scores for each account, and then the results were analyzed into qualitative and quantitative data to identify trends for successful programs. So I'm just going to briefly share a couple of those themes that came up. And I believe Britt has dropped a link in the chat, and feel free to dig in more to the full report. So one of the clearest findings is that accounts sourcing year-round ingredients locally, things like chicken, meat, dairy, or roasted coffee, consistently achieve higher Farm to Fork scores. These products are higher cost, higher volume, and available every week, and so they can really help move the needle more than seasonal produce alone. Next, relationships are a major driver. Strong relationships with vendors, whether a small farm, an aggregator, like farmed, sorry, never mind. Farm Fresh Rhode Island, excuse me, or a seafood partner like Red's Best. These are some of the biggest predictors of success. So chefs who regularly communicate with farms and farmers visit them or plan menus around what they can provide tend to have much higher farm to fork scores. And in fact, some chefs doubled their scores simply by working directly with farms rather than relying solely on distributors. We also learned that chef engagement is one of the strongest indicators of high performance. Chefs who understand our program, who, know their current score, have a strategy, whether that's focusing on chicken, seafood, or artisan goods, they consistently achieve stronger results. And in phase 2, we actually found that chef retention had one of the highest correlations with farm to fork success. And interestingly, geography wasn't always a deciding factor. We have accounts across the country in a lot of different, growing seasons. And in 2017, some of our highest scoring regions were cold weather states like Minnesota and Ohio, places with short growing seasons. And these teams really succeeded because they had clear strategies and really strong relationships. But by contrast, in 2023, some of the highest scores came from Northern California, where longer growing seasons are a strength. But across all accounts, the same message emerged. Local purchasing really succeeds when it becomes a part of the culture, when chefs feel supported, when vendors are treated as long-term partners, and when guests understand the story behind their food. Farm to fork really becomes more than a purchasing commitment. It becomes, a shared mission and culture. So with that, I'm excited to now turn it over to our panel to dig deeper into these findings and share how this work really comes to life on our campuses. So we have a great lineup of speakers representing 3 different universities in New England. And we will leave some time at the end for questions like Britt mentioned. So please feel free to submit any questions that come up in the chat anytime. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see all of our speakers. And for the sake of time, our panelists are going to introduce themselves as they answer the questions, share where they're working, how long they've been with Bon Appetit, and So to jump right in, I'd like to start with Ty and Shira. I'd love for us all to better understand the landscape of local vendors in New England specifically. So starting with you, Ty, can you talk about the types of vendors you work with in the region, especially in terms of long-term vendor relationships and local foods that are most prominent?
Yeah, thank you, Elise, and nice to meet you all. I'm Ty Pulp. I'm the Regional Director of Culinary Operations for Bon Appetit. I also oversee Brown University. So, for us at Bon Appetit, the vendor relationship is really at the heart of what we do when we work with the local artisans, the local farmers, local producers in and around New England. We try to really build those long-term relationships with those individuals and those owner operators. So we're not just placing orders with those folks, that we really know what they're growing. We know what they're bringing to market during their season, and we find a way to put that product on our menus with a seasonal mantra. Again, Rhode Island and New England, it's sort of a summer growing season directly. So we really try to hone in, during that summer season, spring season, a little bit into fall. In the university setting, it's sort of an opposite sort of spectrum of how that calendar works outside of our growing season. So we do a lot of work in that time frame to sort of build through the off growing months to sort of continue the push for our local producers. We're lucky to have amazing access to such amazing products in and around New England, from our farmers to our local fisheries. And whatever's harvesting, we like to get that to our loading docks. And those relationships that hit our loading docks that eventually hit our guest plate, that relationship is super important from a transparency aspect, a consistency aspect. And we also drive home. We know exactly where the food's coming from, how it's grown, where it's grown, and sort of that background. So that relationship is sort of the core with our local artisans and farmers and fishermen to sort of know exactly where the products come from.
Okay, Ty might be having some. Oh, you still there, Ty? Well, let's shift over to Shira. You work with culinary teams across the country, so you have like some different insight into, how New England compares to other regions. Could you talk more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was also involved in the initial white paper, so it's interesting to kind of think back on this. And then also in my role overseeing Farm to Fork, I get to kind of see what each region, the strengths and the weaknesses. And you referenced Northern California for really high Farm to Fork scores. But I think that's something that Ty spoke to that's really special about New England is the longevity of the relationships. We have so many vendors in that region that have been with us since 2012 or earlier, which is a really long time. So like Highland Farm, for example, is a dairy in Western Massachusetts where we've been working with them since before 2012. There are other very long-term relationships like Pierce Brothers, SB Windsor, Dairy, Bread's Best. I think really like when we look at New England, a lot of these relationships have really lasted the test of time and have continued even through different operators who pass, who go from different accounts to another account, or, they retire and they pass down that knowledge of those vendor relationships. And that's such an important part of our Farm to Fork program. It's these relationships with our local vendors and those direct communications. And New England is such an example of that. I actually sometimes when I'm talking to chefs in other regions, I talk about New England because of just that model of keeping those relationships really strong. In other regions of the country, there's a lot of turnover. So there's a lot of kind of, maybe it's a bit of, short attention span. You want to find the next new best thing, which is fine. But I think something that's really special about New England is staying with the same folks. There's one example that I think is really cool that we were talking about as a group earlier when we were preparing for this, which is we had a long-term vendor who was, we would reference them all the time, and they were a really, beloved vendor in our network. And when he retired, the farmer went on to a new farm, and now we work with that vendor. So we're really continuing to support some of the same folks, and I think that that's just a very special part of Farm to Fork in New England.
That's great. Yeah, and so many of those relationships are held in the panelists we have here: Ty, Chef John, Don, Alex, you all. Those relationships, you hold them. And so with that, Chef John and Chef Alex, I'd like to talk to both of you about purchasing strategies and the importance of having those strong relationships with your vendors. So John, I know you are passionate and very talented at serving local seafood, especially as a fisherman yourself. Can you speak to how you balance higher cost local seafood with budget constraints in your menu planning?
Yes, thank you, Elise. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. Just to introduce myself real quickly, I'm Jonathan Canberra. I'm the Executive Chef, Director of Culinary Operations for Roger Williams University, affiliated with Bon Appetit as well. I am a Rhode Islander. I'm very passionate about all things in Rhode Island and of course, throughout the New England region. Outside of my duties as chef, local chef, I'm also a registered commercial fisherman. with the state of Rhode Island, so very passionate about the New England fishing industry. I do know with Bon Appetit, we follow the standards of the Monterey Bay Seafood Watch Aquarium. So we work with that alongside our local vendors here in assuring that we follow the standards of the Monterey Bay Seafood Guide, but heavily focused on what we can bring in from the local fishing fleet. A lot of the stuff that we bring in comes from the fishing fleet out of Point Judith, Rhode Island, right here, as well as the fleet in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and Gloucester. So again, being a commercial fisherman and a chef, very passionate about that. Passionate about local food as well. Been involved in local food most of my career, I'd say dating back about 26 years now. And I know Elise asked about fishing, but real briefly, just talk about our heavy commitment to Farm Fresh Rhode Island and Market Mobile. We've been involved with them since the beginning, which was 2004 in the state of Rhode Island. And since they have grown into this massive food hub that supports well over 300 different vendors throughout the New England region. And it's not just, local produce and chicken or dairy. It's artisan purveyors as well that are, making preserves and jams and jellies and pickled vegetables of that sort. But to go back to Elise's question, how do we find room in the budget for a higher price protein such as, fresh locally caught seafood? And truthfully, the answer to that question is pre-analyzing it in your year prior to the budget. And if you would want to commit to a local fresh seafood, sustainable seafood program focused in the New England region, it's really boils down to making sure that the university allows you some of those funds in the budget. That is the truth. And if they do not, we can work through Bon Appetit and the universities and manage to find some cash flow for maybe something else that is still just as important for our students and our guests, but you might be able to find a little bit of cash flow and, for example, pepper in just one local seafood item, not have a very abundant seafood program like we have here at Roger Williams. I mean, we are the ocean state, so we do believe that it's important that we continue to support the fishing community. But I think that's first and foremost is really trying to set aside some dollars in the budget for something that is dear to my heart, as well as Bon Appetit's standards with Farm to Fork and Fish to Fork. And then, building those relationships, which I've heard a few times already, is key to success with that. Visiting, your fishing purveyors, going to the boats, seeing how the boats are bringing in fish on a daily, going to the auctions. We've been to the silent auction in New Bedford on several occasions with our teams. So those are all eye-opening experiences that really connect you and allow you to understand the commitment that you are making. And that is the truth. We're making a commitment. Again, being a commercial fisherman, I know the vulnerability about bringing my product to market. It needs to move quickly, especially if you want to find a very fresh product in the end result as a chef for your account.
That's great, Chef John. Yeah, you run an amazing program at Roger Williams, and I'm glad you mentioned Farm Fresh Rhode Island and their Market Mobile program. They've really been instrumental in helping our accounts in the Rhode Island, Massachusetts area access so much more local food. Now, Chef Alex, I'd love if you could talk about your experience working with Farmer Rick on your tomato sauce recipe and how you are able to incorporate seasonal or limited availability items, especially being in such a urban setting, like right on Boston Common.
Yep. I am the executive chef. Oh, can you hear me?
So your audio is a little quiet. Oh,
How about now?
it's good.
Okay. Hello. Thank you, Elise. Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Drum. I'm the executive chef of Emerson College here in the heart of downtown Boston. And actually, me working in this area is reflective to my upbringing. I am native to the inner city of Boston, Massachusetts, and coming into Bon Appetit and learning about the Farm to Fork program was eye-opening to me. And it also has been a profound experience, being able to connect directly with a farmer, where we're on a first name basis, and I could call and maybe catch him or her on a tractor, on a real tractor. For me, the Farm to Fork program is important because we get to help the smaller individuals in our communities, the students here at Emerson College, the beneficiaries, but also the staff gets to learn and get a better understanding where the food is coming from. Uh, with Farmer Rick, him and I have a special relationship, and it is great because I've never had anyone care about what I'm serving from their perspective. Whereas Farmer Rick has asked, what will we need? And I said, could you grow 8-ball squash? We want to stuff them. And he grew a batch so that we could feature those on our menus. Our pizza sauce is made with his crushed tomatoes, and we get apples, applesauce, cider, winter and fall squashes, um, onions, carrots, celery, tomatoes, sliced tomatoes. Um, the only problem in this region is that the growing season is limited, um, which it's great that we can support the farms and we can utilize their products. But unfortunately, there are times where we have to deviate, where in my case, there's two recipes for the pizza sauce. Because when Farmer Rick is out of the crushed tomatoes, we'll deviate until he comes back. So for me, working here and working with the local vendors, Farm Fresh Rhode Island, and some of the local purveyors, has actually changed me as a chef. I mean, it just proves that there's always something to learn. There's always a new perspective. But it's actually changed the way I shop and cook for my own family.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's awesome hearing about your relationship with Farmer Rick. And yeah. Well, there's been a theme of talking about seafood as being really a strength in New England. And so while on the topic of long-term partnerships, Ty, we have a really unique relationship with Red's Best in New England. I was wondering if you could elaborate more on how their model works with our higher ed accounts.
Yeah, sure. So, Chef John, so adequately speak about, our relationship and being so close to the coast in New England, that there's an overabundance of species that aren't typically, served on plates. Majority of that seafood's being shipped and exported, across the world. And for us to sort of really hyper focus on the really true local species that are in our waters, Red's Best has been a great partner with us in that sense that they're a no bycatch, fishery. So what boats catch that day and bring to their docks, they're selling to us. And what that means is that, it sort of eliminates the sort of high end market, restaurant market, where there's an opportunity to use and sell these fish that are just as delicious, just as nutritious, as some of those high market value fish. So Red's Best program, we work with them directly on their sustainable catch of the day. So we actually take whatever they have an abundance of that's being caught the day before. So at their loading docks, if redfish shows up or pollock or an abundance of monkfish, we lock in a price with them that's under $6 a pound, and sometimes a little bit lower, where it never goes above that. So they know that we're going to take that delivery of 1,200 pounds of fish 3 times a week to help them grow and also help that fisherman who has nowhere to offload that fish except exporting it somewhere across the world. So our partnership with them is very deep. We've been working with them in this region for over 15 years. There's a lot of other great fishery companies that sort of do that same thing, but Red's Best has really been a tremendous partner.
Thanks. Yeah, and they also have some awesome like student-facing educational materials and the great traceability to be able to really make that connection between what we're serving and the story behind those ingredients.
That's a great point. And when we serve here at Brown, when we serve the sustainable catch of the day 3 times a week, we actually put up QR codes. The student and the guest can sort of throw up that QR code, and it goes directly to the boat and where that boat is currently and what they're catching. So it's a pretty unique experience.
Super cool. Now back to you, Shira. You work with and support chefs across the country working to meet that 20% local purchasing commitment. How do you engage chefs with local purchasing to meet these goals and enroll new vendors?
Great question. So there's a few different ways. Sometimes chefs come to me. A lot of the times, we also have a forager team. So we have 21 foragers across the country who are strategically placed in regions. So we have a New England forager, we've got a Northern California forager, and those are chefs who are tasked with basically being the point person for their region. Oftentimes they've been with the company for a long time, and they have very strong relationships with both the accounts in their region and also the farmers in their region. And so I work closely with them to kind of help them work with chefs in our network who want to engage with more farm to fork vendors. We also have, a process of onboarding new farm to fork vendors. With New England, we've talked a lot about how we have our long-term existing vendors, but we do also enroll new vendors into the program. For Carabin Farms, for example, is a good example of that. They started partnering with us in 2024. And we've mentioned Farmer Rick. Farmer Rick previously was at Horse Listener's Farm. So he then transitioned, I believe, over to Carabin, and we enrolled Carabin. And so that process, I worked with Joe at RWU on that process. Basically, it looks like engaging with the farmer, the chefs engaging with the farmer, kind of helping them through the enrollment process, kind of helping them look at what that means, and then setting up an ordering schedule. And oftentimes what's cool about that is that farm doesn't just stay within that account. They oftentimes then start working with other accounts, especially in New England. We're all very close by. So that knowledge is shared. But the foragers are a really amazing resource for us because they're just wealths of knowledge about what the landscape looks like. I can't be in every part of the country at the same time, so I rely very heavily on the knowledge of our amazing chefs and foragers and chefs, operators like Alex and John and Ty and Don, who have these direct relationships with our chefs.
Great. Yeah. And our forager in this region, James, Roger really can't be here, but really well together to seek out those new partnerships. Mm-hmm. And now, Don, I'm sorry, you haven't introduced yourself yet, but you've been so involved in so many farm to fork relationships, being Emerson and Boston. And I've seen firsthand how Emerson really excels at student engagement, like engaging students with local vendors in your cafes. So I'd love if you could speak more about what you do to engage students with local ingredients, what impact this has on students' dining experience, and their understanding of local food systems.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Dawn Sadiq. I'm the resident district manager at Emerson College in Boston, and I've been with Bon Appetit for almost just about 9 years now. Honestly, one of the main reasons I joined the organization was their farm to fork and sustainability practices as an organization. I'm very passionate about that. I think I work with Alex on a daily, and he's certainly passionate about the same. So I think that really helps drive our program, not only with our team and our employees, but also with the students on campus. So Emerson is downtown Boston, a very it's an art school, so we have a lot of very socially aware and passionate students as well. Um, I think there's a number of ways that we try to engage students. Elise and her team and fellows come to our campus. We partner with Emerson Sustainability. There are student groups on campus, Emerson Green Collective, etc., that drive that with students. But we partner with them a lot on a lot of different events. We routinely bring in vendors that we work with. Pierce Brothers was here yesterday. We bring our vendors in. So we put a face to the name of whatever we're getting. So Pierce Brothers does our coffee. Fog Busters, Pierce Brothers, whichever name you want to go by. But so they get to interact with the students. So the students learn how that coffee is processed, where they're getting it from. Farmer Rick, great partner with us too, came from Horse Listeners, transitioned over to Carabin Farms. Again, we've taken students on tours of different locations there too. So, little field trips here and there, so they get out, experience, go apple picking, etc. Just to kind of engage them as much as we can. I've got a great marketing team here too. We have student interns that are able to, again, just kind of put out what we're doing, educating students where our food is sourced from. And trying to put them in front of the farmer or in front of the artisan as much as we can. So we do that pretty much on a monthly basis, whether it's Farmer Rick's coming in or Pierce Brothers. We just recently started with a local bakery. So they've been in Craig's Hot Sauce, etc. So there's a laundry list of folks that will come in and actually meet the students, sample their product, and kind of educate at the same time. So it's a win-win all around with that.
That's great. Yeah, I'm constantly blown away by the creativity of Emerson students and the ones that work for you to do marketing, and they really do some amazing education through social media and engagement of the student body. So I love to see that. And we're going to start transitioning into the Q&A. I had a question that's actually kind of similar to one that an audience member asked, and it's for Chef John. So Carrie asked about how you go about using lesser known, lower cost fish varieties, especially from the perspective of educating students about species that they might not be familiar with. And so I'm curious if you could talk more about how you menu those underloved species to students that might be reluctant to try new foods. And this could also apply to other local ingredients that students aren't familiar with.
Yeah, it's a great question, Elise, and whoever else had asked the question here. But it's an educational opportunity, first and foremost. Bringing in something like scup. We do use a lot of Arcadian redfish. although the price has been climbing on that a little bit. But, bringing in those smaller underutilized species like that and just doing a sampling table, first and foremost, is key. Similar to what Dawn said with, outside vendors and farmers coming in and highlighting their vegetables and their hot sauces and their coffees, things of that nature. So that's, I think that's step one. And then sampling it out, and menuing it into something that is not so complex, like maybe a seafood chowder, where it's not just scup, it's potatoes, it's cream, maybe it's bacon, maybe it's not bacon. So it's not just a straight, fish protein that they're not really familiar with. So kind of, just letting them tip their toes into the beginning of the swimming pool with that sampling. And then, maybe in the coming weeks, if the chowder was a hit, that gets rolled out into one of our main menus in our cafes at, say, like our classics restaurant. And then it's, maybe it's pan roasted, pan seared, maybe it's fried. A lot of students love fried food, whether it be fried chicken, fried clam cakes, fritters, falafel, whatever it may be. That's an easy way to showcase something that's unfamiliar to the student. But I would say too, though, just going back to what I originally said in my first statement, we are known for a really good seafood program here. So I think that some of the students that come in and want to be on our meal plans as freshmen, they kind of expect that from us already. So being that we have somewhat of a long history with supplying some good local seafood, I think that helps as well, where the student body may have heard from a family member of theirs, a cousin, a relative, a sister, a brother. Wow, they're serving beautiful local seafood over there. You've never tried it. You got to try it. We've had students from all over the country that have really had nothing before other than maybe, like fried frozen fish sticks. And we turn them on slowly. By really, yes, I think starting with samples and educating our students, and marketing is key as well.
That's great. Thanks, Chef John. We have a couple of questions about lightly processed or frozen ingredients helping to kind of like extend that season. We've already kind of talked about how, in New England, the growing season is not necessarily aligned with when we are serving students during the academic year. And this makes me think of a new partnership. We were just awarded a Kendall Food Vision Prize. That is a partnership specifically focused around extending the growing season and having those easy to use ingredients in our kitchen. So Ty, would you be able to share a little bit more about that partnership and why using lightly processed or frozen ingredients benefits you?
Yeah. So that specific Kendall Foundation, prize, we work closely with Hope in Maine, which is sort of a local food incubator. They have a huge social and economic justice push where they work with people who want to bring, whether it's a pre-made product to market or, sort of working in that. So they do a tremendous amount of very good work in our market, just being an incubator, and they're the fantastic company. So we work closely with them on some projects with South Side Community Trust Growing, which is another sort of trust-based organization that helps immigrants find farming land to sort of produce and work in the farming agriculture market. So we work closely with Hope in Maine and Southside Community Land Trust to sort of figure out a way for growers to extend their season or what they can produce to extend their season. So we worked with a couple of those farmers, and they're going to plant specific vegetables for us to pickle to sort of through that season and buy directly from them. Has a huge social economic, justice standpoint. We're extending our season by offering our sort of clients and our customers freshly, pickled local vegetables. So it's a win-win for everybody across the board. And the Kendall Foundation was amazing to award us that grant. So it's really going to push some great product.
That's great. Yeah, and on the topic of presenting unfamiliar ingredients in familiar ways, I think there's also a beet ketchup in the mix. So I'm curious how students will receive that. Um, there's a question that I'd love to ask to Shira, which is, are there any specific requirements that you seek from vendors during that onboarding and enrollment process? If you could just speak a little bit to how that process looks for enrolling a new vendor.
Yes, absolutely. So there are requirements. Part of what differentiates farm to fork from just, you know, a local vendor. I think one distinction that I oftentimes make is when I was in college, there was a local turkey vendor nearby us who was huge, CAFO, did not meet our requirements for what we view as farm to fork. So it's really important to us to kind of make that differentiation. As I kind of spoke to in the beginning, we're looking for folks who are local. So what we view as local is within 150 miles. There's some like ripples to that when we get into the different sub programs, but broadly speaking, within 150 miles, owner run and operated. So the owner being actually involved in the day-to-day operations, and small, within under 5 million in annual revenue. So these are really important to us. So when vendors are going through the enrollment process, there's also different requirements for the different sub programs that I spoke to. So for locally crafted, for example, they have to meet 2 of the 6 locally crafted requirements. Some examples of those are, for example, like locally sourced or traditional artisan, using traditional methods. So we talked about Craig's hot sauce. I believe he's using local ingredients. Maybe someone else can speak to it.
Yeah,
so,
no.
and
he is. Yeah, he is. He's using. He's actually essentially bought all the peppers from a farm out in Westford, Mass. So,
yeah. So he's a great example of, he's using traditional methods to make the hot sauce, and he's also using local ingredients. So when we're enrolling a locally crafted vendor, we're looking for, evidence that they're meeting those 2 locally crafted parameters. And there's 6 of them, so they can pick and choose. But so there is, if you want to get into the brass tacks of it, there is an application that vendors have to fill out that we review. The chef who's working with them on enrollment oftentimes is kind of their point person who's working with them on that. And foragers oftentimes tend to be really helpful in that process. So that's kind of what that process looks like.
That's great. So I'd love to ask the next question to Dawn and Chef Alex, but anyone's welcome to jump in. And that is, if the college dining team wants to strengthen their local purchasing but doesn't know where to start, like what are some first steps you'd recommend?
Well, you know what? I mean, we're really fortunate. We've got a lot of other locations around us. I mean, Roger Williams is a great resource for specific things. I mean, when we were just having our call, kind of prepping for this, there was some very cool things that John's doing down with the fisheries and stuff that we haven't tapped into as much as I would like to up here. So, I mean, I think certainly the collaboration with other accounts is good. I like to just in the summertime when we're slower, I like to go out and visit farms and see what they have and try. And if we're looking at like changing concepts, a couple years back, students wanted us to put in gelato. So I found like a guy who made his gelato locally, right? So we were able to enroll him into the Farm 4 program as a local artisan. So I mean, I think it's getting out again, relationship building. When we had horse listeners, obviously we have continued that relationship with Farmer Rick and DeCarabin Farms, but the previous owner who retired, he had also built a lot of other relationships with a lot of other smaller farms in his areas for honey, for syrup, for other things, pickles, right? So so that we still have those connections, and are able to continue to build on those.
Sort of playing off a little bit what Dawn just shared too, is that I think a great place to start those relationships is get out to your sort of very small local farmers markets and sort of talk with those farmers to see what their scalability is. If they can meet the needs that your loading dock needs, or that your service needs, it, how big can they grow? Maybe they can grow something specific for you. Maybe they can plant 2 acres of sweet potatoes, whatever that is. Maybe they have an abundance of tomatoes, and you sort of work with them to sort of package tomatoes for the off season, or whatever that is. I think making those connections and seeing where that starts, and really truly seeing what a farmer's scalability is, and if they don't have that scalability, how you can sort of work with them for what they can offer you.
Great point.
Okay. So we have a question from someone who works in early childhood education centers, asking about like cost of local foods. Are there any tips you all have, especially the chefs on the panel, for how organizations can purchase local foods on a tight budget?
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, we all sort of have the overwhelming bareness of a budget to stick to and in the business. So I think dabbling your toes and sort of starting small, maybe working with one farm that maybe you're just buying the tomatoes for your deli operation in, or making your sandwiches with, and sort of just building on it brick by brick. And before you know it, you'll have an abundance. But start small. If you try to go all in right away with budget constraints, of course, that's gonna maybe collapse on you. But I would start small, bring in something small. Dawn mentioned pickles, or pickle veg, or whatever. Start with one little section of one little area of your dining area, and sort of build it from there.
I agree with that. I agree with that. And sometimes it just reflects into menuing. You could have a high cost item and you could pair it with something maybe a little lower cost, but still has a high acceptability rate, where you're able to balance out the cost and still feature or highlight one local item as you grow the program. But I think again, starting small, meeting people, asking what their capabilities are, is a good way to start the Farm to Fork program.
Great. We're starting to reach 1 o'clock, so gonna ask maybe one or two more questions. I just saw a question pop up about what would you say are the top barriers to increasing regional procurement? Anyone's welcome to jump in.
I would jump in on that, Elise. That question has been floated around in our industry, especially here in the New England region, in our community, through universities and restaurants for the last 25 years. And I think the only barrier is being afraid to make the commitment. And that's the truth from my perspective as a chef in Rhode Island and New England. Yes, we all have budgets. We all have restrictions. We all have somebody that we're answering to in the finance department. But we are professionals, and we there are ways. Chef Alex mentioned them. Chef Ty mentioned, we all talked about kind of peppering in just the toes in the pool, that kind of sort of thing. But there are ways to find money in your budget. Starting small, I think, would be probably the best way to break that barrier. I know I'm repeating what the two other chefs just said, but that's probably the best solution to start. And then realizing that not all of this food, I do think that, we have in New England, over the course of the last 25, 28 years, we've come so far from where we were. And I don't believe that the price of the food is as expensive as a lot of people think it really is. Yes, it's not locked into contract buy-in or corporate buy-in and very structured prices, But if you take the time to build those relationships that we've spoken about today, make the commitments to visit the farmers. Let the farmers know too, hey, look, this is really all I have to afford, that I can afford. This is all my account will allow me to spend on lettuce. Is this something that you can meet me in the middle with? We don't ever want to cut the price from the farmer. That's not what we're in this for. We're there to support them. But there are ways. The farmer may say, he or she may say, okay, yeah, I can drop it 75 cents a pound and still cover my costs. So those commitments to the relationships, having those conversations, breaking that barrier, taking that chance, starting small, are probably the keys to the success of like Chef Ty said, eventually an abundant, locally sourced food program. And it doesn't have to be everything. It could be 5% of your budget. It could be 15. With us at Bon Appetit, we want it to be at least 20%. But I think that's starting small is the key.
Yeah, I was just to kind of echo that. I think something that I've seen as a kind of trend when I see accounts who are really exceeding expectations on farm to fork is oftentimes operators and chefs who are just so passionate about it and who are doing whatever they can. Sorry. Doing whatever it takes to actually make that happen. And I've seen chefs go to like Amish farms, for example, to actually go there and help them fill out the enrollment materials and take photos themselves. So I think we have a lot of really amazing chefs at Bon Appetit who are extremely passionate about farm to fork and about connecting with local farmers. And I think that goes a really long way. One thing that I remember we learned in terms of what strengthens farm to fork relationships is communication. These are farmers who want to work with us and who want to figure out a way to make it happen. And so there's a lot of communication that happens and just trying to figure out how we can work together. That goes a really long way. So I think that's really huge. And then the last thing that I also wanted to just mention, we've talked about Farm Fresh Rhode Island in terms of kind of increasing your local purchasing. Working with local food hubs and aggregators is really helpful because it allows you to access lots of different farm to fork products within just one point of communication. So that would be another tip that I would throw out there.
That's great. I'm going to ask one more question and then we're going to jump into survey. So please stick with us if you can. It's a question about forward contracting and how much pre-season planning goes into working with those smaller farms. I know a couple of you have alluded to that. But how do you work with farms, on the plan to order, harvest to order, making sure they have enough volume before the academic year?
I can take it first. I think that it starts first in your relationship with that farmer and sort of, talking about that preseason, what that looks like, how much you sort of can forecast if you have that ability to purchase from them and they can sort of plant based off of that. And having that relationship is key, especially we write our menus seasonally and weekly. So it really helps us sort of plan for that process, but also helps them know what they can afford to sort of purchase and move as they grow their operation. We've worked with farmers in the past where we've, prepaid for a season's worth of tomatoes, or we've prepaid for, the kelp farmer to sort of get his operation going and sort of just working with them directly. I think is a huge piece of where your menus are going to land and where their growing season is going to land and sort of, having that applicable relationship.
It's great. Thank you, Ty. And thank you all, Chef Alex, Don, Shira, John, Ty, for taking time to join us today out of your busy schedules. And thank you all, attendees, for joining us. We hope you gain some insights about local food and feel inspired to put our learnings into action as we all work together towards a more resilient and regionalized food system. So with that, I'd love to turn it back over to Britt. We just have a quick survey for you all to fill out. She'll share the info.
Thanks, Elise.
Thanks.
We have a webinar evaluation up right now. It looks like 32 of you have completed it. I would love if more of you completed it. It helps us know whether this webinar and its topic was helpful to you all. The other thing I want to share is that FINE has begun its planning for the 2027 Northeast Farm to Institution Summit, and your voice matters. Sharing your input will help us gain better insights on how to create an event that meets your needs and your network's needs. So in the chat, Sarah's also going to put a link to our summit planning survey, and we'd love your feedback. And also, my second and last announcement is that our final webinar in this series is going to take place on Wednesday, March 11th at 12 p.m. And to register for that, we'll also put a link in the chat. It's on unlocking the full potential of school food systems with presenter Susan Lee from University of Maine and one of the students from University of Maine. If you also visit our webinar series links, you can access all the previous recordings of the webinars from this amazing webinar series. And with that, I'd like to say thanks to the Henry P. Kendall Foundation for supporting this webinar series. Thanks to y'all for joining us. Thanks to our amazing speakers, and we look forward to connecting with you soon. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.